Good evening. Welcome. And thank you for joining us for the final conversation of our Grief and Loss series. Grief is where love lives first. Let's talk therapy. My name is Tanya Smith, and I'm the Community Relations Coordinator with Gift of Life MOTET. That's Minority Organ Tissue Transplant Education Program. We launched this series of conversations in February of this year. And the goal was to share information to help the community with the grief and loss we were experiencing then and even today. Dr. Jennifer Matthews from Oakland University was the first to share and help us define grief and shared how we face and manage through those painful feelings. In September, our focus was on our youth and how we help them navigate through grief, but also the trauma of losing a loved one. Our elite panel of presenters collectively had more than 80 years of experience working with our children. Thus far, these three prior conversations have collectively over 3,500 views on our social media outlets. Tonight, we are excited to have with us again Dr. Sean Fuqua to lead us in this final conversation. Grief is where love lives first. Let's talk therapy. Dr. Fuqua will share how to handle those feelings associated with losing a loved one as we approach the holiday season. She will discuss myths and misconceptions about therapy, how to find a good therapist, and what to expect in a therapy session. Dr. Fuqua, along with her colleague, Miranda Jennings, will share some candid information about being a therapist that has had therapy. Before we get started, we want to hear from our newly promoted Director of Public Education and Community Relations, award winner, Dr. Ramona Chapman.
All right. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you. And I join you in saying good evening to everyone. We are so excited that you have joined us on today in this fourth series of Grief is Where Love Lives First. I am so excited to be here, and I think this has been such an important conversation. And I know that tonight's conversation about therapy will be one that will help all of us as we approach this holiday season. And on today, also because we are celebrating Veterans Day, to make sure that we are paying honor to all of those who we might not ever know, but because of their sacrifices, they have made life much better for all of us. I'd also like to give congratulations to Tanya Smith, who has done a phenomenal job in putting together this series. And so once again, as we gather on tonight, I would just hope that you would listen with an open mind, with an open heart, with open ears, and just allow everything that is being said just to speak to and to just kind of simmer in your mind, in your spirit, and in your hearts at this time. So I'd like to say welcome to Dr. Fuqua, and I am looking forward to this particular discussion. Once again, thank you. And also I must say thank you to our producer behind the scenes that you might not see, Jennifer Tislerigs. I would like to say thank you, Jen, for once again making these sessions meaningful and purposeful.
Thank you, Dr. Chapman, for those remarks. Just a few housekeeping items. Feel free to enter your questions in the chat or comment area, and we will pretty much address them as we go. And in the next couple of weeks, everyone that has participated in these series of conversations will receive a keepsake from us. So if you've joined the conversation, you haven't registered, please do so. So it gives me pleasure to present Dr. Sean Fuqua. Dr. Fuqua is a licensed professional counselor, co-owner of Licensed Professional Counselor Institute. She is an author of a children's series of children's books, Growing Places with Bailey. She's a wife and mother. She's a trainer, and I think sometimes she's a trainee as well. She mentioned that. So without further ado, she will introduce her colleague, Miranda Jennings. So let's talk therapy. Dr. Fuqua.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, I want to thank the MOTAP organization for having me and also allowing us to talk about grief. It is a conversation that definitely needs several parts because it's such a large thing to talk about. So thank you for putting this together. Thank you for allowing us to our platform. And I also want to thank Miranda. Miranda is a limited licensed professional counselor. And what that means is she's working to get fully licensed. And so she works with our organization, the Licensed Professional Counselor Institute, and she has agreed to volunteer to share her experience as a person on both sides of the couch, as well as she's going to participate in our mock session that we're going to do a little bit later in the evening. So thank you, Miranda, for volunteering and sharing your expertise and experience. So we're going to start our conversation of Let's Talk Therapy. And one of the things that we wanted to incorporate in this conversation was the benefits of therapy and why it could be so beneficial when you're going through grief. So let's talk therapy. One of the first things that I wanted to do was kind of recap some of our definitions for grief. And so, again, grief is an emotion characterized by deep sadness or sorrow. We also have loss. And so, often when we talk about grief, there's grief and loss. And so, loss is recognizing that something has changed. There is no longer visible or no longer there. We also have secondary grief. And secondary grief, sometimes you don't hear about as much, but it definitely evokes some of the same feelings, such as a change in relationships, change in schools, parents who have children who go off to college, family changes, so divorce or separation, changes in finances, loss of job, or change in lifestyle. So it evokes some of those same feelings that you get, that sorrow and sadness. Bereavement, which is being in a state of loss, which is usually associated with a death. There's also traumatic loss, and traumatic loss is wrapped in shock or violence to the circumstance. There's also sudden loss, the unexpected loss that leaves disbelief. Again, it can take a while to kind of work through sudden loss. And then we have anticipated loss. This is something you usually see where a person is ill, but you can begin to grieve before the person actually transitions. And so just some definitions to keep the understanding and things that we have talked about in the past with this series. And so what is normal when it comes to grief? Well, first, I want to remind you that grief is not a diagnosis. Grief is a feeling. And so again, when you are experiencing grief, it should be considered normal. Grief can last up to 4 years or longer. And again, depending on the circumstances of the loss, will make that determination. Some of the things that you see in grief is that first year can be difficult because it's a year of first. And then also grief can come in waves. And so again, after the first year, it could be several years down the line, and something just hits you. So grief comes and goes. Also, do you have emotional closeness or safety in expressing your emotions? Depending on what type of household you were raised in, sometimes expressing our emotions can be a challenge. And also, what are the other stressors that are going on in your life? And so these questions are also important to how you facilitate grief and what you see as normal. So what do we know? So as mental health professionals, there's a few things that we keep in mind when it comes to grief and loss. So everyone has experienced a loss of some sort. Everyone manages grief differently. And again, as we talk about the different types of grief, if the person was sick, if it was a trauma, if it was a child, a spouse, pet, everyone manages grief differently. Um, Keep this in mind. You could feel before you can speak. And so, what I'm saying here is that feelings are there. You need to acknowledge them. Before you could put sentences together, you were feeling. Emotional wellness is a part of mental health. And so, knowing how to manage your emotions and take care of your emotions is very important to the overall of your mental health. Anxiety and depression can be stress related. And so, again, as we talk about grief, if it's not resolved or emotions are not addressed, they can turn into what we call diagnosis of anxiety or depression or other mental health issues. When we are looking at mental health symptoms, one of the things that we do is we talk about fatigue. We're asking how you're feeling. When we're talking about someone has a loss, we're going to ask you how are you feeling? Okay, where's your stress level at? Your eating habits. Are you eating more? Are you eating less? Have you find yourself with a loss of appetite or leaning into sugary or salty snacks? What are your sleeping habits? Are you socializing less or are you socializing more? Sometimes we put a lot of things on our plate so we can stay distracted so we aren't feeling or dealing with our emotions. And then also, children have mental health issues. Children as young as 3 years old have been diagnosed with anxiety. And so, again, Miranda, what are some things that you know in terms of your experience as a counselor when it comes to mental health and grief? Can we hear her? I'm not, I
I'm
don't
so
know.
that's my fault. I'm sorry.
There you
I was
are.
muted. Ta-da!
All right.
Zoom days. Yeah, I love what you said about eating habits specifically too, because a lot of times when we're neglecting our bodies, which it can provide a lot of different symptoms that kind of tend to exacerbate each other. So if you're not taking care of yourself, you're getting mineral deficiencies, as most of us know in the wintertime, vitamin D, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I feel like, especially going through grief, going through a hard time for a lot of people, tending to kind of, neglect themselves. And so it is really important to kind of get some of those basic habits back in line, I think. So yeah, I think I just like what you said about that. So I wanted to add to that.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what we can do.
Yeah.
We know the holidays are coming, and that's one of the reasons we felt like this conversation was so important to have. And so, one of the first things that I suggest is acknowledge the pain or the feeling. Acknowledge the pain or the feeling. And so, some of those things could be sadness, anger, loneliness, uncertainty. Stop and just kind of take inventory of what you're feeling. Attending a holiday event will be different. If you've experienced a loss, whether it's a death or a divorce, the holidays are going to be different. And so just kind of preparing yourself. So you're going to feel some things that are different. And it's okay. But just knowing that the holidays are going to be different. They don't have to stay in a low place, but remember, we want you to feel what you need to feel to process it properly. Um, are you aware of your behaviors? Can you see yourself? This is a good time to just kind of stop and take inventory of what's going on. Have I filled up my schedule so I can stay busy? Have I begun isolating myself? We talked about food, or Are you finding yourself a little bit more irritable? Are you yelling more? Do you find that you're crying and you don't want to cry? So this is a good time to take the inventory of how you're feeling with the holidays approaching.
Yeah.
Also, adjusting to the changes and coping skills, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But one of the things that I was thinking, because grief is so large and so huge in terms of how does it fit for each person? Well, I said each person processes it differently, and depending on the circumstances that surround the loss will make a difference. But what I do know is therapy can help you find coping skills to process healthy and process properly. What do you think, Miranda?
Yeah. I think that grief has a way of also to exacerbating negative thoughts that we all might have about ourselves already. And so, isolating is something that people do a lot. I think when they're grieving, when they're first grieving, sometimes for a long time. And so, paying attention during the holidays, paying attention to how your body feels, noticing, that stress and anxiety, because I think it's good to take a break from it sometimes, but I think also feeling it is a good idea because it allows you to actually feel it and process it. And then maybe question yourself on how to move forward. What do you want to do about it? Do I want to go to this family event that maybe there's going to be some people there that are going to ask me a lot of questions that I'm not ready for? Or it's a situation where, you maybe someone died and you share family members or friends with that person, and having the support might be nice. And so kind of balancing, isolating or getting some time for yourself, versus isolating, and just kind of paying attention to those things. So yeah, I think holidays can be really tough, and that's normal if you're experiencing grief.
Absolutely. And so, one of the questions that I was asked, if you are having a holiday dinner and a member of the family is missing, should we mention that member? And so that's a very good question. And that's a very good question because it definitely depends on the circumstances of the family. So my first inclination is yes. And I would say yes, but that's why I also say you need to discuss that with your therapist because what we also know is that when you get into family dynamics, um, sometimes the backstory isn't the best story. But for most families who are experiencing a loss, and I would say yes, it's absolutely okay to mention. And when I've dealt with clients, sometimes that is part of the struggle. You don't know if you can bring it up because it's painful for somebody else, or even for you to bring it up, it can be painful. And so, absolutely, it can vary. But yes, there is nothing wrong initially with bringing that up. Miranda, you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it often, especially if there is a collective loss of someone that you're, spending time with people that also know that person. I think almost like, grieving together in a way of honoring them, talking about them. And also too, relationships are complicated. And so I think a lot of people have a lot of guilt over the fact, that maybe they didn't get along with that person, or sometimes, or they were a difficult person, even though they loved them. And so being able to have those, both of those very conflicting feelings about someone, and still being able to bring that up in conversation. Let's be honest, Aunt so and so was kind of a jerk sometimes, but we just loved her so much, and we're gonna miss her stories, or whatever it is. Just being able to be honest with all the feelings that come up, so that you're able to process all the feelings that come up.
Yes, being honest with your emotions is key during the healing process. So let's talk about therapy a little bit more. Um, so that was a good question. Should we talk about family members? And so my suggestion is why therapy? Because I think that's a great place for you to kind of process that out and discuss it with your therapist. Number one, therapy brings a healing process that can help you and guide you through the process. And so with the uncertainty that comes along with the loss, that gives you a safe place to talk about it. And also, therapy can provide healthy strategies to help you cope. A lot of times, you see people, as I said, you might fill your calendar, you might isolate, you might drink a little bit more, you might be sipping wine and taking sleeping pills because it's hard to sleep at night. If the bed is empty, it's somebody that you slept with. It's a different strategy that people use to kind of push themselves along. Working with a therapist to make sure that you have healthy strategies to help guide you through the healing process. The other thing with a therapist is that you can have support for a specific area of focus. And so I shared with Miranda, and we both talk as I work with new therapists that I have been to therapy myself. Going through a divorce and being a therapist, I had to find a way to deal with the things that I was carrying. Going back into a home that it's empty. The bed is empty. There's a lot of feelings that come along with that. And so even as you're working with somebody, you can have somebody who's trained in dealing with guilt, who's trained in dealing with guilt for a loss of a child. We also have therapists who are trained in loss of pets, and again, pets are a part of the family. And when you have a loss, I was working with someone this week, but they've had the cat for 15 years, and the cat was very close to my client. And there was even confliction about a pet or animal. And so again, being working with someone, you can have someone who is trained in a specific area. A therapist can also help you normalize your feelings. We spoke briefly if there's conflict in the family or conflict behind the loss, there can be guilt, there can be anger, there can be some shame for feeling the way that you feel or speaking about someone who's transitioned, to speak about someone who you had to care for. But there was also some resentment in that. And so therapy provides a safe place where your feelings are normal. You feel how you feel. And so we help you work through that. And again, therapy is a safe place for authenticity and acceptance. Miranda, why therapy for you? I mean, we've talked before, but what made you choose to go to therapy?
Yeah, I think I get it. It comes to like a weird efficiency in my head. I wanna fix things. I wanna kind of move forward with things in my life. And I think from an early age I recognize that sometimes it's just so much faster with multiple hands. And so I think the first time I saw a therapist, I was like 16 or 17, just kind of going through some depression in my life, just sort of figuring out life and all that goes along with that. And then other times, um, just trying to really, I think doing it from a young age was a good idea because it allowed me a chance to see that it's like no big deal. You can just go and use this person to talk to completely confidentially to be able to just talk out your feelings and having them validated, having them normalized, having someone tell you like, yeah, that sounds about right. About sometimes even like the maybe wackiest things that you might think of, or oh, I'm the only one that thinks this way. That was really truly what's been so wonderful about therapy, and like learning that from a young age. The first time I went was sticks out to me. Obviously, still stayed with me.
Yeah, that your feelings are valid. Now, I know somebody's thinking, wait a minute, the therapist go to therapy? How does that work? Well, I actually have been an educator for 12 years working with counseling students and psychology students. And I encourage them so because what I want them to know is it's okay to be vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, how you care for yourself during that vulnerability. Often because vulnerability puts us in a place where we can be hurt, it is a scary place. And so I want people who are in that therapist chair to be of the best mental health that they can possibly be. And the way that you do that is being able to care for yourself. Okay. So again, I encourage people to go to therapy, including my therapists, my students, and my new therapists.
Mhm. I just wanted to touch on something somebody said in the Facebook chat that came through, asking about any recommendations for books or videos, or if they're not ready to go to therapy, and that there's actually there's so many ways to go to therapy, and I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but you can, I mean, there's books, there's so many self-help books that it's sort of like, pick your approach. I love a good podcast, and one of the ways that one of the podcasts that I recommend to people, Esther Perel, Where Should We Begin? She's lovely. It's basically couples therapy sessions, but it's a really good look at the dynamic of therapy. And that's like a live therapy session, which is kind of nice. So I mean, I'm sure that you probably have some books to recommend as well, maybe, or at the end, or something like that. But I know there's a couple platforms where you can actually text and email a therapist instead of being face-to-face, or even being, telehealth video chat. So there's so many platforms now.
We're going to talk about those things at the end. Definitely open up and kind of field those questions. Let's maybe take them through what they can expect.
Yeah,
in therapy.
That sounds great.
Oh, it's coming up right after this. So let me ask this question. Myths and misconceptions. For those who are on with us live, I want you to share some things that you've heard about therapy, or trying to get clarity on, so we can answer those questions. These are some of the most common ones. I can't afford it. And so one of the things that I want you to know is that therapy is available and accessible to all. And here's how. First of all, if you have state-funded insurance, mental health is now a part of a benefit. And so therapy sessions are available to you for no cost, and it's accessible. There's also EAP, which is an employee assistance program that a lot of employers have as an additional benefit to your medical benefits, where with medical benefits, sometimes you have to meet deductibles and things like that. With the employee assistance programs, a lot of times you can get sessions for free. Usually it's about 6 sessions, and that varies depending on the EAP program. But therapists are contracted to provide services for you for a few sessions, and those sessions are done at no cost. There's also therapists who provide therapy on a sliding fee scale. Very often, new therapists, depending on what area you live in. And we're going to talk about how you find those therapists later in the show. But somebody who can offer the services that where you can afford it, affordable. Also, if you have health services cards, those cards that you get from work for your medical doctor's visits and things from the pharmacy, the health HSA cards. I couldn't think of the name of them, but they also cover therapy. And then if you are living in an area with a larger university that has a counseling program or a social work program, very often the universities will offer services because students need to see people while they're in their program. And so a lot of times they'll have low cost. Sometimes it may be for the students, but sometimes they may have platforms that are open up to the public, whether it's group sessions or, on Tuesday they see people from the public. So you can look and see if your local college or university has a program. And so again, I want to tell people it's accessible. It takes a little search, but it is accessible. And we'll talk more about how you can find that. Other things that I've heard is that people think that going to therapy means that they're crazy. I literally have heard that this week, or they're a failure, or they're weak, there's something wrong. And I often say therapy is not where you go when something's wrong, it's where you go to get something right. Therapy is validation of yourself, saying, I'm important and I'm valued. Like if something is off, as Miranda mentioned, like having more hands to help, that's just better for you. And so again, it's kind of the view that we've had on therapy, because Their mental illness is one thing, and we are trained to work with mental illness. But when you're talking about a mental health issue, it's just where something might have gone off track, and so helping somebody get it on track the healthy way is a good idea, and working with somebody. And that kind of, I'm gonna jump down to my mental health is fine. A lot of times, people say I'm okay, but there is a okay, there's a good, there's a better, and there's a best. And so very often my goal is to help you get to your best self, and bring in tips and coping skills to help you get to your best self. And so we can help you move past just being okay, or give you insight into your window of tolerance and help you find that good middle ground. Is therapy confidential? Yes, therapy is confidential. We do have to report things if you're talking about harming yourself or harming others. But all of us have been trained, even when it comes to those questions, we're going to work with you first. You want to know, where's this coming from? What's going on? So therapy is confidential. And even as Miranda said, it's very rare that you can tell someone something in therapy and we find it unusual, or wrong or wacky. Um, I have people to talk to. I've heard people say that I can talk to my mom, or I can talk to somebody at my church. I have a support system, and that's absolutely great. And I absolutely incorporate that into part of the treatment plan if you have a support system. But this is the thing, I'm also listening for, what's your eating habits? I'm listening for, what's your sleeping habits? I'm listening for, what's your family history? I'm also getting questions that I can measure stress level. And so having a trained professional, there's some additional things that we look for to make sure that your mental health is intact, and strong, and going in the right direction. Too many pressures can weaken it, and that can turn into not only a mental health issue, but a physical health issue when you start talking about other ailments. Therapy doesn't work. I've heard that as well. And a lot of times I tell you, it's the person, you have to have a connection with your therapist. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to make sure you find someone that you can connect with. Miranda, what are some misconceptions? And I don't know if we've had anybody who shared online, but what are some misconceptions or myths that you may have heard while you have been doing therapy?
Yeah, I think the perception of others, is something that is really strong in all of our heads all the time, and it I think that's one of the things with therapy. It helps kind of clarify that. But the like what you're saying, like I'm a failure, I'm crazy, I'm weak. Um, it's nice, to be able to kind of clarify those things, because a lot of our misconceptions about ourselves, uh, weakness, for example, oh, I'm weak, like crying is weak, or any of those kind of social cultural norms that kind of get put into our minds. A lot of times our thoughts about ourselves come from a very an earlier time in our lives. A lot of times, if we kind of sit in our body and say, okay, like this feeling of me being weak or being crazy, where does this live in my body? Or like, how does this feel? Or how does this, and a lot of times we can, if we kind of sit with it for a minute, we can associate it back and remember maybe the first time that happened to us, or the first time we felt that way, or, and remembering and realizing that we may have come up with some of these thoughts about ourselves at a very young and not emotionally, mentally evolved age. And so that thing that we're thinking about ourselves, I'm crazy, I'm weak, I'm a failure, might actually just be untrue completely. And so I think that's the nice thing about therapy also, is that, you might go through your life thinking those things are true. So like, how could anybody help me because I'm all of these terrible things? And so first of all, in therapy, it's going to kind of clarify, well, actually, those things aren't true. So now where do you go? Let's kind of see who you really are and figure that out. So that's, I think, the thing that is a big misconception that I just wanted to add on to.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even as this time we're in now, um, uh, technically we're still in a pandemic, but there was loss during the pandemic, and there was a lot of isolation, changes. I've had so first of all, I'm booked, and I'm just sharing that just to be let people know people are coming to therapy. People, you probably have no idea who's coming to therapy. People are coming to therapy. And most of the clients that I have now have talked about how COVID has affected them, from losing people, from being isolated, from social anxieties coming up, from workplace bullying, finding that they found such a relief of being home and so much clarity and didn't know that they was under so much stress, losing a job, being downsized and let go. And so COVID has really opened up um, or pushed people to seek out help. And so I'm grateful that people are coming and trying to move past these myths and misconceptions about therapy. So now I think we're going to do a mock session for people. So what we wanted to do was just kind of take a few minutes to kind of give you an idea of what you can expect in therapy. And so in this scenario, what I want to do is kind of take you through what I would do with a client that I've worked with for a few weeks, for a while. So this isn't her first session. So your first session will be a little bit different. So we have an already established relationship. So that's very important. And here we go. Hi, Miranda. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I don't know. I haven't been feeling that great this week. I'm just kind of struggling. As you know, I've this relationship that I was in ended a while ago, and we've been together for 6 or 7 years, almost 7 years, and it's just all the little things. Like I'm not going to see his family, and I'm not going to see his friends anymore, and that kind of stuff is really sinking in, especially going into the holidays. Even though I know our relationship ended for the best, so I'm just really struggling with that.
Okay, well, that's understandable. Your friends, his friends became your friends, and so on and so forth. And families, a lot of times, the families can happen. But you feel like breaking up was the right thing to do, correct? Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about the feelings that it brings up. So, do you feel like it's sadness? Do you feel like it's loneliness? What are you feeling, and where are you feeling it?
I definitely sadness, but I've never really kind of like sat with it. Like, um, so maybe, yeah. I think it's a loneliness for sure, and sadness, and maybe even a little bit like I feel a little bit abandoned.
Mm-hmm. Abandoned by whom? Do you see a face?
I guess, yeah. I mean, it's funny because maybe, I mean, definitely him, but just in general, it's not a new feeling. I definitely feel it intensely from this, but I can definitely, just talking about it right now, I'm just noticing that it's not the first time I've felt this way, um, and so I've just been, yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna put a push pin in that. I want to go back to that. I want to hear more about your support system.
Okay.
Who's in your circle right now?
Um, I mean, I guess,
Who's in your fave five? If I could put it like that, your fave five. If you have five people that you can identify, and they could be the same people, who would you call?
yeah. I have two. I guess I have two really good girlfriends. Um, and probably, I mean, my mom definitely. Um, and then like my boss at work actually, her and I have known each other just for years, and I talk to her regularly. And then maybe a coworker of mine who actually, he and I are very close now. So
Have you felt comfortable enough with any of them to discuss the breakup? I mean, how much information are you comfortable sharing with them? These are your close people, but
Yeah. You know what? I am, and I try. I don't want to bother them, and also, I find that sometimes talking to my friends, they just kind of end up just talking badly about
mm-hmm,
my
mm-hmm.
ex, and I just it makes me not want to talk to them. It makes me kind of want to close up. It's sort of just like it makes me feel like, come on, move on already. This person was terrible, and it's like, I chose this person. Does that mean I have bad taste? And so it's kind of hard to talk to anybody about it in detail.
Could we put a filling word with that?
Guarded, like yeah,
Mm-hmm,
protective.
mm-hmm. So right now we know you're carrying abandonment, and when it comes to your support system, there's a little guard up, so there's some walls up. And
Mhm.
so, what I want to do for you for this week is for homework is to journal about the woman behind the wall, the woman behind the wall, and just kind of talk about who is she and the things that she's feeling. And when you come back next week, we'll kind of decipher that and kind of put that back where how that abandonment touches that. And I have a few more exercises I want to do with there, but I have some things for you, and it's going to be all right. Now, I know the holidays are coming, and so any of these people on the list, do you feel comfortable with doing holidays with any of them?
Yeah, I think my mom actually,
Okay.
she's in general, really good. She doesn't pry with too many questions, but also just kind of checks in with me on how I'm feeling, which is nice instead of, shoulds or, any of those types of things. So I think, and, I'm going to be around her a lot because of, the events, holiday events and things like that. So I think that actually might be nice to spend some time with her.
Good, good. I like you to reach out to her too, and kind of talk the plans, and we'll talk about that next time, and follow up on your homework.
Okay.
I,
Yeah. Thank you.
I appreciate your openness and allowing me on this journey with you. Thank you, Miranda.
Thanks so much.
So we have to keep it brief. It was so, and then I like we were totally doing it. This was unscripted, and she just said yes. I'm comfortable with talking. And so again, usually a session goes on from 45 to 50 to 55 minutes, depending on the therapist and the service that you're getting. And usually, again, you are looking for someone who's going to validate your feelings. So let's kind of talk about what to expect when you go to therapy. And so remember, I told you I was doing the session where we have already established a relationship. But if you were meeting someone for the first time, there's some things that you are looking for. And so, it's, again, somebody who's listening to you. Um, but your body, Miranda mentioned your body earlier. Your body is a physiological response to your emotions. So pay attention to what your body is feeling during that therapy session, especially that first therapy session. Do you feel relaxed? Do you feel like you want to open up? Or do you feel like you're scared? Now, you may be nervous when you first go in, especially if you had never been to therapy before. But by the time that session is over, by the time you have finished your conversation with the therapist, there should be a sense of relaxation. Again, you are listening for someone who allows you to talk. You are listening for someone who validates your concerns. You also want to pay attention if there are too extreme or ask questions where it feels judgmental. Therapy should not be judgmental. It should be a judgment-free zone. But I do tell people they are human, and we're going to help you find a good therapist. You might have to work through some people, but you need to feel comfortable and relaxed in that setting. Does a therapist interrupt you? Okay, because you're looking for someone, because this is a different conversation than you're having with friends or family. Again, if you have friends or family that can support you, they should be good listeners. But sometimes being a good listener means you don't say anything, you just listen. And even during our mock sessions, there was a moment where I naturally wanted to go into silence when she talked about abandonment, because in a session, that's what I would do. Silence is very important in a session because that allows you to kind of process and feel what is happening inside your body. Also, does the therapist respect your time and return phone calls, or if they're running late, did you get some type of text or heads up that they were running late? So you do want someone who respects your time. So yes, pay attention to your body, what you're hearing from the therapist, and how you feel. So finding a therapist. So first, I would say have an idea of what you're looking for. And sometimes that can be difficult, but I say start with some baseline. Do you want a male or female? Are you looking for someone of a certain age? Are you looking for someone of a certain ethnic background? Are you looking for someone who specializes in certain things? And so again, you do want to have like at least some idea, and you might not know, but just start with something. What would be the next thing to do is go on their profile or their website. This is where you will find information about their fees, if they accept insurance. I mentioned the EAP, and their therapeutic style, their specialization. If you have a child, you want someone who specializes in children. We're talking about grief. You want someone who specializes in grief. If you're talking about depression, or post traumatic syndrome. You want someone who specializes in those things. You might be interested in a certain therapeutic style. There's different techniques that we have been trained in, and different therapists use different things. Hypnotherapy, some people are looking for someone who can prescribe medication. There's CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy, and I can go on and on. You might have some idea, you read something or heard something, seen something on the internet. You can also ask for referrals, and I know that can sometimes be difficult if you don't want people to know you go to therapy. But if you can also ask another therapist if you know someone who does therapy, if they have any referrals, if it's a family member or friend who provides therapy. And then when you find someone that you want to know a little bit more about, you can request a consultation or a phone meeting, or send your questions in the email. We do understand as therapists that for people, it's their first time, they're going to have some questions, they're going to have some concerns. And so, yes, we do welcome that opportunity. Miranda, is there anything that you could think of when you're talking about finding a therapist, or what you did in finding your therapist?
Well, I think one of the things that I really like to do when I find a therapist, because yeah, I mean, not every therapist is a good therapist fit for you. I know some people can relate to this, like when you find somebody to cut your hair or to color your hair or something like that. Not everybody is good for you specifically. And so I think that can be difficult to find someone and then go, yeah, they're not really a good fit. So in the past, I have, seen that person for a few sessions, sometimes even up to 5 sessions, just to kind of see, because that they at least are able to validate me. I mean, now if it's like a really bad match, it's a really bad match, but something that helps me figure that out faster is going with a list of like core issues that I would like to address or that I need help with. And that really, I just have it, I go to that first session, or I go to the consultation, or, however, therapists all do it kind of differently, but being able to say, well, these are the things I struggle with. These are the things I want to work on. And even right there, some therapists might be like, hey, I don't specialize in that. And I don't feel even comfortable to help you. So I would, you'd probably be happier with somebody else that understood that more. And so that's a good way to kind of vet that first off. Because again, it's confidential. So, if you never see them again, they're not going to go, tell everybody on the street what they heard from you. So if you can keep that kind of basic
And when we joked and said it's somewhere in between your medical doctor, because you need to trust and have that confidence in that professional that's treating you, and the person that is doing your hair. So your barber, the one that braids, the one that gets you lined up and cuts and curls. When you are trusting somebody in that spot, it's a relationship. And you have to trust that person, and you want to come out feeling good or feeling better. So we're somewhere in between that, because the difference than going to just a regular doctor is you're coming to see us on a weekly basis. So we're building a relationship. And so you need to feel like you trust the person that you're building a relationship, and that you want to see them more. And when you come out, there's going to be a change or a shift. And so it might take one or two or even three visits to find somebody. And sometimes that can be a little overwhelming. But hopefully, with the questions that you ask when you are going through your consultation, you can get some of that addressed before you actually meet the person. Um, so let's talk about where they can find somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody shared, and sometimes your hairstylist turns into your therapist. You're absolutely right, because you trust them. I mean, that's what we're saying. There's a trust in that relationship. The same thing in the barbershop. I mean, there's conversations that you just open up and you share, because it's a safe environment. And it's the same thing you can get in therapy. So let's talk about how you find it. So hopefully you got like what you're looking for, but then how to find it. So Psychology Today is the largest platform in terms of finding a therapist. And remember, we said you can put in the type of therapist you are looking for. Usually there are pictures. Sometimes they're the logo of the person, but it will go through what they specialize. It will tell you their fees. It will tell you if they take insurance, they take EAP. It'll tell you if they're offering online. So Psychology Today is going to be a good resource. It is the largest in North America, and so you can use that to find a therapist in your area. Also, Therapy for Black Girls. I'm also listed on Therapy for Black Girls, and so there's specialty sites, and so there's all kinds of specialty sites. So depending on what your issue is, or if you are a certain population, they do have therapists who work with LGBTQ families. So you can put those kind of things in to search out for the therapist database. And Therapy Den is one of those that deals with alternative lifestyles. And so again, you have a site that is available if you know that you are looking for someone, and you just know that it may be you might be a polyamorous family, or have an open marriage, and instead of kind of working through sharing these personal details about your life, Therapy then is a database for therapists who work with alternative lifestyles. There's also BetterHelp, which is one of the largest online platforms. I'm also a therapist on BetterHelp, and BetterHelp is nice because what you do is you go in and you fill out a profile, and you kind of put some of your needs in. If you're looking for someone who has a certain religious belief, if you're looking for someone for a certain age, or that has a certain technique. You can fill all of that out, and they have over 20,000 therapists, and then they send you matches, and you pick who you are. And with BetterHelp, it's like encouraged. If you don't like the person, you don't have to continue. BetterHelp is also one of those platforms that you don't have to see your therapist. You can chat with your therapist through text messages. You can also talk on the phone through the platform on your therapist until you're more comfortable. Or you can do, like I said, a consultation and ask a few questions to find out if this person is a good fit. So I really like therapists. And Miranda, I want you to talk about Cerebral. That was a site that you brought to my attention, and they are doing some awesome things at Cerebral.
Yeah. Cerebral is a kind of a new platform. They advertise on like Instagram and stuff like that, to Facebook. And it's similar to BetterHelp in that it is online platform where you can get the app and use that. It is more, you will have a virtual session with your therapist, but it also provides psychiatric services, medication, which sometimes it's really hard to find a proper psychiatrist just with the pandemic right now too. It's kind of made it even harder. Your general practitioner can prescribe medication oftentimes for anxiety, depression, stuff like that. But sometimes it might be a little bit more specified, and it is really nice to have somebody. And Cerebral offers psychiatry services, medication services, as well as therapy. And you can kind of, you pay like a monthly subscription price. And they do accept a good amount of insurances. I won't even say specifically many insurances at this point for Michigan, because they are a like statewide website. Like they go in all 50 states, I believe. And then they are just slowly trying to accept more insurances. And then I think also too, they're going to be starting to incorporate nutrition training, or nutrition as well, information, because nutrition just plays such a big role in our mental health, and then our physical health as well. So I think there's just more studies coming up on that too, which I'm so happy about. So yeah, that's a nice one as well.
And so I know we have a few minutes left. I want to know if we have questions. I want people to ask. I want people to get clarity about therapy. I want people to see how they can support their family members who they may see struggling. And so if we have any questions, I don't know if we can put them up. Okay, here's one. Okay, is it possible to become depressed 2 years after a loss? Yes. So I answer that. I am beginning to feel much worse. Oh yeah, absolutely. That since my loss in 2012, absolutely. Remember, I said therapy, grief comes in waves, and very often, Miranda and I were talking earlier. Sometimes you kind of put yourself in this space to function and to go back and to kind of do your daily life, and the grief gets so heavy and so hard, and it kind of pushes its way through, and that's what most emotions. They're going to find their way through. So absolutely. And unfortunately, if it doesn't get treated, it can turn into depression, or complicated grief is another name for it. I look forward to my weekly weekly therapy sessions, being able to speak without judgment, to have someone point things out that I may not have recognized, has been a literal lifesaver for me. So that's absolutely awesome. I love to hear things like that, where people say, I'm looking forward to my safe space. And that's
saying
what
it
you
loud too. I mean, just being able to say things out loud, and then you hear it differently. Like, whoa.
Absolutely, saying it out loud. Have you seen an increase in patients since there's been so many loved ones lost during the pandemic? Absolutely. Most of my colleagues are booked. I'm booked. The benefit of working with new therapists, I can say, hey, I trained this person and she's excellent. And so, yes, we definitely have seen an increase.
Yeah.
In therapy, are you able to talk about things that you can't talk about with others because they won't either understand or they're not comfortable talking about you certain things? Absolutely. I've been doing this 17 years, and, I shared with Miranda, I'm still learning. I talked about polyamorous families, open relationships. You find that people know that they're going to be judged about those kind of things. And so you come to therapy and they're like, oh, by the way, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. And for me, it's a safe zone. I'm listening to connect with the emotion. And that's how I train my clinicians. So it can be a safe space, and I want them to be able to talk about everything. And it's just like Miranda said, can they talk out loud? A lot of times when you can talk things out loud, they come out and you hear them, and you know how to guide and direct yourself. When they stay in here, they're just in there. And sometimes the voice gets louder, or sometimes the voice gets lost. But it's a benefit of speaking it out loud. If you find that the therapist is not a good match, how do you handle that? Do you tell them you won't be back? Will your insurance let you switch? Okay, so that's a great question. And so I'm going to answer in two parts. Okay, so yes, your insurance will allow you to switch as long as you go to a provider that is covered by the insurance. So there's no problem with the payer. Do you tell them? So we tell people that you should. This is me speaking as a teacher, that both ways. If it's not working out, you tell them, and you know you want the client to say. But I also know that's kind of scary because it's like a breakup. People don't want to get put out, but for me, it's more important that my client feels comfortable. So if you don't feel comfortable having that conversation, then it's okay. But it might be beneficial to have that conversation if you feel comfortable in having that conversation. And yes, we encourage clients to share why they're not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
The podcast. Thank you for the podcast, GOL. Good information. I needed to get this encouragement to find a therapist. Very good role play. Thank you very much. Can you give the podcast again,
Yeah,
Miranda?
the
Because you gave a really good one.
Esther Perel, Where Should We Begin?
Mm-hmm.
And I think she's from Belgium, and she's just a really wonderful therapist and has a lot of really good books. She has 2 podcasts, actually. She has another one called How's Work? And it's just nice for like handling stress at work, handling stress with the pandemic, stuff like that. So yeah, Esther Perel, she was great.
And one of the ones that I like is Therapy in a Nutshell. And Therapy in a Nutshell does a podcast and you have a YouTube channel. Very, because she condenses it and makes it easy to follow.
Yeah.
There's a question: is there a standard list of time for therapy that is authorized by insurance companies? So yes and no. Meaning, it depends on the insurance provider, and then I'm going to say contract. Okay, and so what that means is, I take Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is very popular in Michigan, but what I found is some of the contracts might have put limits on, so they might say you can only go 20 sessions. So that really gets into what your provider, your insurance provider, will tell, and you can call on the back of the card and get clarity. A lot of times, your therapist, when they're working to clarify your benefits, they're going to get that information as well. But yes, that definitely varies, and that can um, uh, be a challenge because some of them have put caps on how many sessions you can have.
Dr. Sean and Miranda, I
Yes.
learned so much. Thank you so much for sharing this so important information. And I think what resonates with me is, are you your best self?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if people can walk away and say, yes, I'm my best self, that's good. But if they can't, they should consider therapy.
Absolutely.
One thing I'm going to ask you to do is, it is 7:03. We're a little over, but what I'll ask you to do is, if you could kind of provide a list of the podcasts, and we will share that with everyone that's registered in the email with the links and everything.
Okay.
And
Absolutely.
and also, just to remind our audience that all 4 conversations is available, is available on our Facebook page, as well as our um, LinkedIn, as well as our YouTube page as well.
Right.
So, Dr. Fuqua and Miranda, would you like to say any closing comments?
Miranda.
Oh yeah, thanks for having us. It's great. I love talking about therapy. I love talking about just being able to just be more open with yourself, and therapy helps that so much. So I'm just grateful for the chance to promote that.
Yes, and I want to say thank you again. Thank you, Miranda. Thank you to Motap and everybody who participated on the questions. I believe Kathy won. She thanked us. So saying special thank you to you. Thank you. All right. Another question. Thank you for good insight. Okay. So we have a lot of people. That's what excites me. People who are excited about this conversation, because I want to tell you, mental health is mental wealth. It flows through everything you do. We talked about the way you eat, your body, how you connect with your partner, your family, your friends. Mental health is a part of that. And if you have an opportunity to be your best self and giving back to others, why not take a chance on that opportunity? It's been so beneficial to me. I like I said, I've been in therapy for myself, and it showed me a version of Sean that I didn't think was possible, which
Mhm.
brings me here to you to do what I do. So thank you so much for having us. And find somebody. We'll help you. We'll stay along. We'll stay around for questions through the Facebook, and you let us know what you need. We want to help you. Mental health is mental wealth.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Fuqua and Miranda. And we want to thank all of our attendees and obviously our speakers. And we just want to wish everyone a great evening and wishing you a wonderful time with your family as we celebrate Thanksgiving and the holiday season. So thank you and have a good night.